Hello everyone and welcome back. So we're going to talk about a very important concept inside of Buildable, and that is services. And you're going to be using services a lot because this is where all your data is going to be stored. You can think of services as places where you can store data that's related to your application. Also, all of these services can be related to entities that are being used in your application. So if you're doing a note-taking application, or if you're doing an application to keep track of your to-dos, then you might want to have a to-do service, because that's an entity that's involved in your application, right? You need to keep track of all of the to-dos that you are creating so that you can create them and retrieve them and update them and so on, right? So if you go into your recipe, as you can see, you can have, if you click on add a new step, you have in here the create a service, right, step. And before we take a look at that, what I actually want to show you is what a service might look like inside of your application, right? So as you can see, you have your recipes tab, and inside of your recipes, you will see all of the recipes that you have created. But if you go into the service tab, then you will see all of the services that you have created as well. When you sign up for a new account inside of Buildable, it comes with a default to-do service. And if you want to create a new service, then all you have to do is type out the name and it will create the service for you. Cool. So let's actually jump inside of the recipe, and I went ahead and renamed the recipe that we've been working on to add a new to-do, because it actually reflects on the name what we're going to be working on this video. We're going to be adding a new to-do and storing it. So let's go into our trigger step, and we're going to be defining, well, I already went ahead and did that, and I defined inside of the schema a text property and a done property, which are the two properties that I'm going to be sending as payload to this recipe. And the text property, it's going to be a string, and that's where the actual to-do will live. So take out the dog for a walk, or for instance, let's add in here buy milk. Obviously we need milk, and we're gonna send a done property, which it's going to be false, because by default it's not done, right, where you're creating it. I think that makes sense. And of course, as we have previously discussed, you get to, once you define your schema, this will verify for you. So if it's not optional and you don't send the text, then it will throw back an error. Cool. So let's click on the add button under our trigger step, and let's click on the recipe step. And as you can see in here, it will add this adds logic to create, read, update, or delete from your databases. And if I have not said this by now, I'm gonna go ahead and say this here, but Buildable is powered by MongoDB. So if you're familiar with MongoDBs and collections and documents, then this is gonna feel like home. But we're gonna be taking a look at that later on. All right, so let's click on service, and let's rename this to create to do, and we will select the service that we want to use. So as to-dos is the service that we have defined. We know that we're going to be storing this to-do inside of this service. Of course, you can have as many services as your application needs, so feel free to create as many as you want. All right, and the action that we're going to be performing is we're going to be creating a new to-do. We're going to be adding onto our service. And of course, we're going to use the spread value to get all of the fields that we're sending into the trigger step. And that's it. We don't need to add any conditions in here. So I'm actually going to add a third step, which is going to be sending back a response, which is going to be 200. Okay, everything went well. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to add a new spread value, and the value will be the response that we get from creating the to-do. Because when we create the to-do, what we're doing is we're sending an object with a text property and a done property. But what MongoDB does is it adds information to that object that we have just created, such as an unique ID, so that we can track this later on, right? This is of course something that we're going to look at later on when we do some examples with Mongo. So we're going to get whatever we get from creating the to-do, and we're going to reply back with that. So I'm going to go ahead and test this recipe. As you can see, recipe tested successfully. We have add a new to-do by milk, which is not done. And we create the to-do. Okay, awesome. And once we have created the to-do, it will add an ID, which is going to be a unique ID for this object in here. And it also adds the author that has created that object. So you can actually query by the author who has created that, who has created this item, this to-do. So cool, you can query by a lot of fields in here. And as you can see in our response, what we get is the actual result of us taking the fields that we get from the object. And after we have inserted those into the service, then we get those back as a response in here with all of the fields that are already added by MongoDB. Cool. So let's go now into our services in here, and let's explore what we have under our to-dos. So when you click on one of your services, you will see that you have the ability to query all of the data that you have added for that service. And as you can see here, I have created some to-dos already, like take the dog for a walk, buy groceries, and obviously the one that we have created just now, which is buy milk, and you can query all of them. So let's take a look at how querying works inside of MongoDB. All right, and yeah, of course, like I just said, how to use MongoDB queries, because Buildable is powered by MongoDB, and MongoDB is awesome, and you should take a look at it because it truly is amazing. So this is an example from the actual MongoDB documentation, which you can find at docs.mongodb.com/manual/tutorial/query documents. And I'm going to select in here the Mongo shell. And as you can see, into the example, what you have is the ability to insert into a collection values. And once you have added these values, then you can retrieve them later on. Right, so what we're going to do is we're first going to click on connect, and after we're done clicking on connect, I'm going to go ahead and clear the console in here. We can actually just copy paste this and paste it into the shell here, and what this will do is we'll insert into your database inside of the inventory collection. It will insert a lot of, well, not a lot, but actually all of these documents. And you can sort of think of collections as folders and documents as files, right? So inside of MongoDB, you have the concept of a collection which holds one or more documents. So a document can be referred to as an object, right? An object that you can query later on. Right, cool. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to clear this console now. And as you can see, you can perform a lot of queries inside of MongoDB. And the first one that we're going to do is we're going to find all of the items that we have just inserted. So I'm going to do db.the name of your collection. So that's inventory. And we're going to do .find, because that's the method that we have to provide. And we're going to send an empty object. And when we send an empty object, we're basically telling MongoDB to just give me everything that you have inside of this collection. Give me back all of the documents. Cool. You can actually send db.inventory.find, and you can specify the field that you want to retrieve that document from. So it sort of serves as a filter. So if you know that you want to just get a collection that has an item property, which is journal, then you can just do give me the document which has inside of the item property journal. So this will filter that query for us, and it will just retrieve one unique document which has this ID, and as we can see from the query itself, it has an item type of journal. All right, cool. So that's just the gist, just like a very brief introduction to like how MongoDB queries work. And that's actually what powers Buildable under the hood. So if you want to perform queries into your service dashboard, what you can do is you can send in here into your object. We can filter by text, for instance, and we can do by milk. And this should only retrieve one item, which is the one that matches the query that we're sending. Also, something really cool that I want to talk to you about is the fields property that we have in here, on which we can specify exactly the field once you find the object that we want to find. So once we have that document, get rid of anything but this field, right? So we retrieve the document that we want, and we want to get rid of everything but just the text. So as you can see, we have retrieved just one document, which is the one from the query, and we just get the text because that's actually all that we care to look at, right? So that's there for you if you want to play around with it. Cool. All right, so let's now add a new recipe where we can actually fetch all of the to-dos that we have created. So I'm going to go ahead and add a new recipe, and this is going to be called get to-dos. Get to-dos. Awesome. So let's add into here a new service step, which is gonna use our to-do service, and we're gonna list all of the information that we have inside of that service. And I'm gonna rename this to s get to-dos. And let's finally add a third step, which is gonna send back a response, which is the list of all of our to-dos. So I'm gonna go ahead and make use of spread in here, and what we get from the listing of to-dos from the service itself. And you might notice that we might not need actually to send in a query in here, so this payload is actually going to be ignored. So let's test this recipe, and as you can see, we send in a payload which is ignored because we're not using it in any parts of the recipe itself. And we use our service and we provide an empty query. And because we provide an empty query, it's going to list all of the different collections that we have. All of the different documents that we have for that collection, which is obviously related to the service. So all of the collections for all of the documents for the to-do collection. All right, cool. So as you can see, we have in here buy milk, take the dog out for a walk, buy groceries, which of course map to whatever we have on the dashboard because it's all of them. So let's take a look now, and we're obviously sending that back inside of our response. So let's now actually make use of this. So I'm gonna open up my add new to do, and we're gonna test this through Postman, right? So I'm gonna disable the authentication for now, and I'm gonna copy the link. I'm gonna use this inside of Postman. And as we have defined, the schema for the to-dos are you need to provide a text. It's gonna be make something awesome, and done it's false. Cool. So if we send this, then it's going to create the to-do, but let's take a look at what happens if I don't send any of the required parameters that we need for the recipe. Then we get an invalid input based on the schema, which of course, again, it's awesome because if you don't want this to be optional, then it's mandatory and you need to send them. Cool. So let's now make the request to our API or recipe, and let's create a new to-do. And fair enough, it returns the to-do that we have already created. Cool. Let's now copy the endpoint that we have for the get to-dos recipe, and we're gonna add a new tab in here, and we're gonna do a post request, And of course, we don't have to actually send anything into this recipe. So we can just send this, and this will return all of the, notice that it returns per row all of the different collections that we have, all of the different documents, sorry, that we have for that collection. And something really awesome is that it gives you the total that we have, that it's there inside of the collection, and the page size. So if you want to implement some pagination on the client side, then this is wonderful to have. All right, cool. And I think that covers the basics of how to create, how to query, and how to list all of the information that you have stored inside of a service. All right, so I'll see you on the next video.